Hello, friends. It's been a long ass time since I've done a video. Listen, I said it could be once a month, it could be once every 10 years. This is just who I am. I've had some thoughts and wanted to post a video about some work or tied to some work that I plan to do pro bono pretty soon here that I'll talk about in some following social media posts. So if you follow my work, make sure to follow at least one of them, my LinkedIn or my Instagram. No, we're not on TikTok. No, we're not interested. But one of those two, and you'll hear more. Also, it's raining in Houston, and people in Houston don't know how to drive in the rain, so there will very likely be a fire truck or 10 that go by, and we're going to roll with it. I've had thoughts on something that has come up for me personally and for a lot of clients that I'm working with and friends and fam that I see negotiating all kinds of liminal and transitory spaces that they're going through in life, in career, in relationship, etc. And all of that impacts how we show up in terms of doing transformative work. So that's where I lead in. And I wanted to share some thoughts on it. It's around intractability, or what seems to be intractable issues. And what I have found is oftentimes when things seem intractable, it's almost a subconscious or sometimes a conscious sleight of hand. And it especially happens when people are on the cusp of doing something really dope, really transformative, really healing. And it becomes a barrier to them being able to cross over in a generative way. And so then I'm reading my notes, which I wrote in a way that I can't read. It becomes important to get curious. It becomes essential to get curious, to reflect, to ask questions, and to also be willing to excavate in order to look around, work around, feel around the barrier, or what could be a barrier. It could be some other things. It could be a desire to stay safe. It could be a defense mechanism against shame or worthiness or rejection. It could be a number of different things, but get curious and reflective and excavate in order to better understand why something may be presenting as intractable and not overcomeable. There are two ways that I work with clients on doing this, because this comes up with every client and some manifestation. And I wanted to share those for anyone that might be experiencing this. One has been a reframing. I learned this from dear mentors, Samya and EJ at Turtle Tank. They had an example of saying something like, I want sugar. I need sugar. And so when you say, I need sugar, there are very specific parameters. There are very specific ways in which that can manifest, but also it can create what seems intractable, because in your mind you may be thinking, I also want to eat healthy. I also want to be nourishing, but I want some sugar. And so it seems like there's this disconnect between the two. When what can happen is you can reframe and say, I want something sweet. And sweetness opens up, as it always does, so many more possibilities. Because if I want something sweet, I can have honey, I can have mango, I can have strawberries, I can have a number of different things. And so it leads to a level of expansiveness that I don't have when I say I want sugar. But it also leads to an ability to create more congruency between the thing that I say that I want, which is to nourish my body, to eat healthy, and this thing that I'm feeling in this moment. So it can be really great to get curious about. I won't say question. Don't interrogate yourselves. The world interrogates us. Don't interrogate yourselves. But to get curious about what the real desire is. sometimes I use a 5 why exercise that is attributed to one of the founders or the founder of Toyota, which is asking why 5 times. It's an infuriating exercise, but it's really, really, really helpful. Because once you get to about the 3rd why, you're a little irritated with yourself, but you start to break through some of the more surface ways that we talk. So that's one way, is reframing. And another that I have really focused on and gotten clients to think about is, how do you live in verbs and not nouns? So breaking down the shorthand. I'm also noticing, and I might get some heat for this, this is especially the case, I believe, for native English speakers. I've been relearning Spanish for like the 9th time. I'll get there. And one of the things that I've noticed that I struggle with is I try to translate shorthand into Spanish. And oftentimes, almost always, the Spanish translation requires a level of deeper clarity and specificity. So rather than just saying, this is it, I may say something else about, this is all that I desire at the end of the day, or something like that. It surprised me how often I speak in a very imprecise shorthand, and that when I needed to translate it, I couldn't translate it directly because there was a level of specificity that was required, that it was like, oh, I probably should have been that specific in English. Anyways, the specificity is not what I want to focus on. It's the shorthand. And often the way we speak shorthand is we use nouns, we use labels. So for example, anyone that knows Erin McClarty knows that Erin navigates in certain ways around people. And what can happen, and I've started fighting back on this, what can happen is people will say, oh, well, you're an introvert. And I've subscribed to that for many years, but what would happen is I would find myself in these situations where there was an opportunity for me to be spontaneous or to diverge or to evolve. And I limited myself because it's like, oh, but I'm introverted. Can't really be in that space. I'm introverted, or I'm an introvert. Can't really put myself in that situation. I'm an introvert. And so once again, it created these levels of intractability, of me wanting connection and to relate, relationality with people. But I didn't do it because it seemed like it wasn't reconcilable with the fact that at the end of the day, I was an introvert. An introvert was shorthand for all these other different things, and came with all kinds of different baggage around what that meant. And oftentimes what it meant was things that I didn't define, but society had defined for me, oftentimes non-generatively, antisocial and all the things. And so what I've learned for myself is living in verbs. I like quieting. I enjoy quieting. That's different, right? Because what can happen is I can say, all right, Erin, if you enjoy quieting, and for me, it means finding quiet moments, quiet opportunity, quiet spaces here and there, because for me, that is how I regenerate. And I physically and emotionally become exhausted when I don't have those bursts and spaces for quieting. I can put myself in situations where maybe I am interacting and engaging more than I normally would be comfortable with. But then I also prioritize thinking, okay, Erin, and you need to be finding moments for quieting. So is there a space that maybe we can seek out or ask someone about, that we can just have a few moments? Do we need to go stow away in a bathroom stall? Do we need to have a friend who understands this about us and can just sit quietly with us outside? It doesn't mean that I have to completely withdraw myself from that situation. It just means I have to find other ways, I can choose to find other ways of negotiating it. And so, by living in verbs, it allows me to get to my intentions, my needs, and my desires in a different way. And again, it allows me to make more connections, because if I just say I am an introvert, that shuts it down. If I say, okay, I am someone who enjoys quieting, then I realize the introvert, and all the baggage of that is not necessarily what I need to focus on. It's my desire to have quiet moments, quiet times, quiet spaces. And so I can build out around that. Again, allowing me to reconcile something that seemed intractable. I can't be in this space, or I can't do this thing because I'm an introvert. into something that is reconcilable. Oh, I can be in community, I can be in relationship, and I need to make sure that I prioritize my need and desire to have these quiet moments because that's important for my somatic well-being. It makes a huge difference. And then something that I am recently learning, unlearning and relearning in community is how do I apply this when it comes to values? And so historically, I may say, okay, what I will do is I will focus on the manifestation of values, what someone might say, what someone might do, as opposed to necessarily getting to the fluidity of the value itself and negotiating the deltas that can come up and how we all manifest certain values and how those values manifest for each of us. So I may say, okay, to be healthy, you must do X, you must say Y. And yes, that may be one manifestation of healthiness, a prioritization of healthiness, or a value of health, but it's not the only one. And if someone is operating in direct contribution, y'all know what I'm trying to say with that, does that necessarily mean that health is not a value for them? It could be. And it could be that in focusing more on talking definitionally about what do I mean by health, right? And what are the more transient, the more ephemeral aspects of health, as opposed to sticking it to it's got to be X, it's got to be Y, so that I can negotiate this space with other people. It's something that I do, but I'm noticing some other people are doing, particularly when it comes to world events that are happening. And we say, well, I have a value of X. And what we don't understand is that our shorthand is that the value of X manifests in WXZ ways. And yes, these may be ways that manifests, but there may be other ways. There may need to be space for people and how they explore and transition into a deeper form, a more embodied form of those values. It's something I'm sitting with. So anyways, these are the reframing and the living in verbs and not nouns are two ways that I work with clients and negotiating situations that seem intractable, that seem like they can't be reconciled for them, that allows them to not necessarily push through, because we're not pushing nothing, but be able to negotiate and navigate and hopefully find their ways through whatever that is. I think Marie, I forget her last name, I will share that in the comments, says everything is figure outable. And the older I get and the more I do this work, the more I truly believe that. So hopefully this is helpful if you're navigating that. I'm going to be doing work, I think, with some folks, Black and brown folks who are encountering what feels like intractable challenges in their organizations operationally, strategically, programmatically, whatever the case may be, and thinking about how that can be figure outable. Until then, I hope everyone enjoys their day.